What if the key to building the world's first city, the very secret to civilization itself, wasn't a sword or a king's crown, but a simple piece of wet clay and a sharpened reed? 5,000 years ago, on the dusty plains of Mesopotamia, the city of Uruk rose towards the heavens, a sprawling metropolis of brick and ambition. And at its heart, within the shadow of the great ziggurat, worked the most powerful people you have never heard of. They were the silent architects of this new world. They were the temple grain accountants. Their office was not made of stone or glass, but of sun-baked brick, filled with the scent of dust and drying clay. Their ledgers were not paper, but heavy tablets of earth harvested from the banks of the Euphrates. They didn't command armies, but they controlled something far more vital: the food that fed them. In a world teetering on the edge of starvation, the person who controls the grain controls everything. Every sack of barley from the fields, every offering of wheat to the gods, every single loaf of bread baked in the city's communal ovens passed through their awareness, recorded by their hands. But how do you manage the wealth of 50,000 souls, a harvest of unimaginable scale, when you don't even have numbers? Their tools were deceptively simple: a stylus carved from a river reed and a lump of wet clay. Before complex writing, they used pictures, pictographs. A stalk of barley meant grain. A head with a bowl meant to eat or ration. A circle might mean the sun, a day. Simple, elegant, and revolutionary. For the first time in human history, a thought, a fact, a transaction could be made permanent. It could outlive the person who made it. A farmer would bring his harvest to the temple's storehouse, a contribution to the city, a tax to the gods. The accountant would take a clay token, shaped like a cone for a small measure of barley or a sphere for a larger one, and press it into a wet clay tablet. He would then bake the tablet in the sun, creating an incorruptible record, a receipt for a world being born. But this system, this elegant solution of pictures and tokens, was about to face a crisis. What happens when a simple drawing isn't enough to capture the dizzying complexity of a booming city? This wasn't just bookkeeping. This was the central nervous system of Uruk. The accountants determined who ate and who went hungry. They allocated rations for the thousands of laborers who dragged mud bricks to build the city walls. They managed the offerings that were said to appease the gods and ensure the next harvest. Their clay tablets were contracts, promises, and verdicts. A single mark from their stylus could mean the difference between prosperity and ruin for a family. They were the intermediaries between the farmer and the priest, the worker and the gods. They held the city's memory in their hands. But with so much power concentrated in the hands of those who could read these sacred marks, what prevented them from cheating the system they themselves had created? The answer to that question, and the city's growing complexity, forced their hand. A simple picture of grain wasn't enough. They needed to know whose grain, when it was delivered, which temple storehouse it went to. So the pictures began to change. They became faster to write, more abstract. The stalk of barley was simplified into a series of wedge-shaped marks, pressed into the clay with the edge of the stylus. This was the birth of Cuneiform, the world's first true writing. It wasn't invented by poets or kings to record epics. It was invented by accountants to keep track of beer and barley. The grand story of human literature began as a footnote on a tax receipt. But this new complex script, a secret language of wedges and lines, created an entirely new problem, one that would echo through all of human history. That problem was a divide. A chasm opened in society between those who could read the clay and those who could not. To become a temple grain accountant was to enter an elite and secretive class. It required years of grueling education in a special school, the aduba or tablet house. Young boys would spend their days from sunrise to sunset learning the hundreds of complex signs, practicing on their clay tablets until their hands ached. They became a caste of scribes, the gatekeepers of information. They held the keys to knowledge and therefore to power. The common farmer could only bring his grain and trust that the marks made on the clay were fair. The accountant's world was a silent one of immense responsibility, a world where a single misplaced wedge could throw the entire economy into chaos. They tracked harvests, beer rations for workers, and even the movements of the stars to predict the seasons. But what was the one transaction they recorded that reveals the darkest side of this new urban life? Among the tablets detailing grain and livestock, we find others. Lists of names next to a simple ration of barley. These were not independent farmers. These were the city's workforce, men and women conscripted to build the monumental temples and defensive walls, paid in nothing more than the food they needed to survive the day. The accountant's tablet, the symbol of civilization, was also a tool of immense control. It allowed the temple elite to manage and mobilize human beings on a scale never before imagined. It was the birth of the project plan, the payroll, the spreadsheet. And it showed that for some, the city was a cradle of opportunity, but for many others, it was a cage, its bars recorded in cuneiform. And as Uruk grew into an empire, the system that built it began to show its cracks. Could a system based on clay and grain truly manage the complexities of war, trade, and diplomacy? The profession of the temple grain accountant didn't end in a single cataclysmic event. It simply changed. As cities became kingdoms and kingdoms became empires, power shifted. Warlords and kings like Sargon of Akkad centralized control. The temple was no longer the sole economic engine of society. The palace, with its own scribes and treasurers, began to rival it. The accountant's job fractured. Some became royal scribes, recording the glorious deeds of kings. Others became tax collectors for the state, a far more feared profession. Others adapted their skills to private trade, recording shipments of copper from distant lands or loans of silver between merchants. The single sacred role of the temple grain accountant dissolved, its duties scattered into a dozen new professions. So, the creators of writing, the architects of the first economy, simply faded into the background of the world they had built. But did they leave behind one final cryptic message for us? Their legacy is not written in a single dusty tablet. It's written into the fabric of our world. Every time you check a bank statement, read a contract, or even look at a price tag, you are seeing the ghost of their work. They didn't just count grain, they invented data. They created a system to turn the messy, chaotic reality of the world into organized, objective information. Their job is not truly lost. It has simply become so fundamental, so ubiquitous, that we no longer see it. It is the invisible foundation upon which our global economy is built. The silent scratch of their reed on wet clay 5,000 years ago echoes today in the silent click of 1 trillion keyboards, each one managing the wealth of our modern world. What do you think? What modern profession, one we see as essential today, do you believe will become a lost profession in the future? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy uncovering the stories of these forgotten jobs, make sure to subscribe to Lost Professions for more journeys into the past.